Hey, yo, what's up, what's up? You know, it's your boy, Kim Millionaire, dropping it like it's hot. Guys, we got some nice topic for you today. Today, we're gonna be discussing marriage and divorce. But we will be talking to one of my guys, one of my homies. He's a lawyer and he got everything under wraps. So today he's gonna be telling us decisions to make, what not to make under marriage and divorce. But before I do, let me drop the intro. Welcome back, my people. You know what time it is. It's your boy, Kim Millionaire, dropping it like it's hot. Like I said earlier, it's about marriage and divorce. But before we go further, let me introduce our guest, my guy. Welcome to Fanboys Talk, man.
Ray.
What's poppin'? What's poppin', my guy?
How we doing?
I'm all good. You mind telling them a bit about you?
All right. What's up, peeps? My name is Nazir Peer. I'm a candidate attorney based at Peer Kareem Attorneys in Johannesburg South, and just want to say thanks to Ray. It's an honor to be here.
You know what time it is. And thank you.
Fanboys Talk.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on. The first thing I want to talk about is maybe the disclaimer first.
Disclaimer.
Yes.
Yeah, legal disclaimer. Very
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
Before we delve into the topic of marriage and divorce, let's just place on record that this video is strictly for information purposes.
Yes.
And if you are in a position whereby you need to seek legal advice, please do so, see an attorney and become informed.
It's about to go down.
It's good for us to have the disclaimer, actually.
Definitely.
It's very, very important. So, my first question to our guest today is going to be basically, what is marriage? I mean, look, people think that just signing papers, signing whatever binds two people is marriage. Look, what is marriage?
Okay. Look, let's take a step back, all right?
Okay.
And understand that marriage is a globalized term. It refers to essentially two people coming together and concluding some sort of union, right? But when we look at marriage, we also need to take into account the different jurisdictions. And when we talk about jurisdictions, we look at the laws of a specific country.
Yeah.
Now, for purposes of our video, let's look at South African law.
Yeah.
Now, South African law comes a long way. It has its roots in what's referred to as Roman Dutch law. And
know that, but
there's
okay.
a bit of influence from English law as well. And based on that, as it stands today, we have three forms of recognized marital regimes within South Africa, right?
Okay.
The first one, the most common one, is referred to as a civil marriage, right? You've heard about that. Man and woman come together, they conclude a marriage, and there are certain laws that govern that relationship, right? In recent times, we've become accustomed to what's known as a customary marriage. And there's specific legislation that governs customary relationships.
Yeah.
You know, a man and a woman can be married and the man can take a further wife in terms of customary marriage. We've heard of the term lobola, how all of these traditions are concluded and there's a legally binding marriage. But we'll jump into that.
Yeah.
And the last and third recognized one is what's known as a civil union, all right? Civil union refers to a marriage between two people of the same sex. So a man and a man get married, or a woman and a woman get married. In the past, unfortunately, those marriages were not recognized until within the last 2 decades, a piece of legislation was passed allowing for that marriage. And within those marital regimes, there are different rules regarding the property of those of that marriage. And I think that's going to be an interesting part to discuss, but we'll get to that. So I hope that covers what a marriage is.
What marriage is.
From the legal perspective.
Okay. So I think what we can do now, let's actually take each marriage and discuss each type of marriage. Let's talk about the civil marriage.
Okay.
Right. If let's say I'm a young man that I want to get married,
Right.
and I don't know what kind of marriage that I need to get into or engage with. How do I get the right type of marriage? How will I know? Obviously, you have to seek an attorney. You have to go to an attorney and discuss with an attorney. But let's go through them one by one. And I would also love to have your perception on which one do you think that is the best for someone that is about to get married, that doesn't know much about marriage.
Right. Okay, first step, always consult with an attorney. I mean, before you buy a vehicle, before you buy a house, you know, you do due diligence.
Yeah.
You take the time to assess, is this the right fit for me? Do I like this vehicle? Do I like this property? Is it in the right area? Can I afford it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, when you're young, you're in love, you don't take the time to do the necessary due diligence.
Love is blind, they say. Yeah.
So take the time, and I guarantee you, we're a very reactive society. Only when things go bad do we want to seek legal advice, legal counsel. But if we took the time in the beginning before we got married and we approached our legal advisors, our attorneys within our local community, you know, set up a consultation and say, look, myself and my partner intend to get married. What is the best regime that will work for us? So that's number one, first step.
Okay.
And unfortunately, not every shoe fits everyone,
sure.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
You know, some people have established businesses. Some people are, unfortunately, they have a lot of debt, liabilities, and they enter into marriages, and they may or may not realize that their circumstances will affect their partner, whether it be in the long run or otherwise. The first regime that we looked at was the civil marriage,
Okay.
which is considered the standardized form of marriage in South Africa, right? You get married and you have a traditional wedding. And when I say traditional, there are different traditions in respect of people's cultural backgrounds, how they get married, who they appear before. But for purposes of the law, you appear before what's known as a marriage officer, right? Who will solemnize your marriage, bring the two unions together, or the two partners together, and conclude one union. What you need to determine then as a couple is what marital property or what regime will apply to your marriage. And we've all heard of the famous term, get a prenup, etc.
I would never get married, to be honest.
Yeah, get prenup, man. Yeah.
But that is factually incorrect when it comes to the South African jurisdiction. Why is that? Because we don't recognize prenups in South Africa.
Jesus. No way, bruh. Tell me more.
So the correct term is an anti-nuptial contract.
Okay.
In South Africa, we've got an anti-nuptial contract, right? But before we delve into that, the default regime within the South African jurisdiction is in community of property. What does in community of property mean? It means what's mine is yours. 50-50. Now we've heard of that case, we've heard of that scenario globally speaking. 50-50. That's default, that's the default position. If you get married in South Africa and you do not conclude an anti-nuptial contract, you are married by default in community of property. You have a 50% share in my assets as well as my liabilities.
Hey, so that's your liabilities. Okay. All right.
If I'm sued, or if the bank comes after me, or if creditors come after me, they come after you as well. Why? Because we are considered a joint estate. What's mine is yours. So you must share in my debts. You must also share in my assets. You know, it's what's fair.
Yeah, so because we're sharing in love, yeah? Okay.
And look, it goes beyond that in terms of concluding contractual agreements with third parties. If I, as the husband or wife, want to enter into a home loan agreement, I am required to get your signature as well. It's almost like there's a joining not only in our personal lives, but on the legal side as well. So that's the default regime. I'll be honest, in my personal experience, that is where the most problems arise. And unfortunately, if you didn't take the time to conclude an anti-nuptial agreement beforehand, and worst case scenario, you get divorced in the future, then you open the door to a lot of problems, unfortunately, in my experience.
Okay.
Personally, at the firm I'm at, we've dealt with estates in the sum of 30-40 million rand estates. And division of those estates at a point of divorce is extremely difficult because you're dealing with companies, shares in companies, assets, immovable, movable property, vehicles. And let's not even get into the part regarding children.
Oh my word.
Divorces get so sticky. But we'll come back to that.
Is it a civil marriage?
So that's a civil marriage in community of property, the default regime. Let's look at the second marital regime, right? So you had the in community of property, the default regime. Now you've got the out of community of property regime, right? Which is broken down into two subcategories. Now within that, you've heard of the anti-nuptial contract with accrual and without an accrual.
Okay, all right.
Now this is where it gets slightly complex,
Okay.
right? Because the accrual system is not that easy to understand, right? In terms of how it relates to assets.
Okay.
So out of community of property without accrual is quite straightforward. You keep your stuff, I'll keep my stuff.
In fact, use cutlass to cut grammar for me.
That's without accrual.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that one.
So it's quite straightforward. You know, if you have assets, if you have properties in your name, if you have liabilities, those are yours. And if I have assets and liabilities, those are mine. If I'm sued or if I'm part of some sort of claim, doesn't include you. There are certain exceptions, but those are legally complex. But for all intents and purposes, what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine. Done deal. So how do you conclude an anti-nuptial agreement? You can't draw it up yourself. You need to go to an attorney, all right? And in today's market, the going rate for an anti-nuptial contract, and you know, like I said, this is subject to you checking with your local attorney, etc. More or less, it would cost you between 2,000 and 4,000 rand. Sometimes more, sometimes less. More or less, that's what it costs for an out of community of property without accrual agreement. That has to be signed, notarized, gets lodged in the deeds office, and it gets recorded against basically the deeds office database. It can never be disputed unless there's extrinsic evidence showing otherwise.
Okay.
So it's solid, it's recorded, and it's there. And when the time arises and it needs to be used or referred to, you can make use of it. The other one is the out of community of property without accrual. Okay. Or with accrual rather. Sorry,
we discussed
without. So we discussed without, then you have with the accrual. The accrual system is quite complex. So it works on determining at a point in time. So you enter into a marriage, and before you go into the marriage, you exclude certain assets. So I, the husband, decide I don't want my beach house in Clifton to form part of our marriage, right? Yep. And you as the wife, or the wife says, I don't want my 2012 Ferrari to form part of the marriage. Those specific assets are recorded in the anti-nuptial contract and are excluded. Okay. However, after the point of marriage, whatever we accrue during the marriage is then split at a point of separation or divorce.
Oh my God.
That sounds like community of property to me.
Exactly. It's almost like a hybrid system. So you have your out of community of property beforehand, exclude everything, and then going forward, there's an accumulation of assets.
So you split that 50-50?
Correct.
That's like the twin of community of property. That's like the twin. Oh, wow, that's interesting. So one question I wanted to ask you before you go to the third marriage is that there's this idea that when you meet someone and you say, can we sign a prenup? Well, which you already made me aware that there's nothing like prenup, it's anti-nuptial, okay? So what is it, ANC?
ANC,
okay,
yes.
so if you say, let's do the ANC thing, people always say, or mostly women will always say, no, you get into the marriage and your leg is already out.
Right.
Have you heard that before?
I don't think I have, but I mean...
But they always say that, like, oh, you get into the marriage and you already planning a divorce.
Oh, okay, yeah, I hear that all the time.
Yeah, you already planning a divorce.
That's a big psychological problem we deal with. And you can maybe discuss it as well, but
yeah,
there seems to be this stigma or there's this notion around if we are to sign an anti-nuptial contract,
There's no love.
you're planning for divorce.
Yeah, I disagree with it. I feel like my main reason why I want to sign an ANC is because I actually want to protect you, the woman.
What did you just say?
All right, so Nazir, just elaborate a bit on the next regime or type of marriage that we have in South Africa.
Okay, so the next or second regime is referred to as customary marriage.
Okay.
Now, customary marriage has been somewhat developed quite recently. It takes into account the indigenous regimes related to people within South Africa. So prior to the enactment of the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act, you couldn't formally or legally get married and have your traditional regime apply. So you had to either conclude the standard marital regime, such as the civil marriage, otherwise it wasn't recognized, right? But there was a development in our communities and in our legislative space which gave rise to that act. And in doing so, we now officially recognize customary marriages. What does this mean? So a man will marry a woman on a customary basis, having met the requirements for a customary marriage. And you've heard of it, the man must pay lobola, there must be a ceremony concluded, there must be a traditional ceremony whereby the families come together. All of the necessary requirements must be met. In doing so, the parties must then register that marriage, that customary marriage. Now, we discussed in community of property. That property regime applies automatically to a customary marriage.
Wow, okay.
Right? And unless an anti-nuptial contract was concluded, then yeah, the default marriage property, the default regime will apply.
I've heard this thing of someone once said to me, "You don't have to sign anything. Let's just get married. You don't have to sign anything." So that means that automatically it falls under community of property.
Correct. So by default, in community of property.
Okay.
And with customary marriages, the husband can take a second wife. He can get married to a second or even a third wife.
I didn't know that.
Right? But what we must understand then is the marital or the property of that marriage between party A and then B, C, D, and E, for example, that has to be determined correctly and equitably between all the parties. If there are specific changes to that regime, it would have to be approved by a court of law. So customary marriages are quite complex, but if you follow the standardized procedure and you comply with all the recognitional requirements, then all's good.
Sure. Okay, all right, guys. I'm getting schooled here, no doubt about that. I'm getting really schooled. There's a couple of things that I didn't know that I'm actually finding out today, and I hope you're also learning something from this. So today you hear I'll talk less. I mean, the lawyers are gonna be, attorneys, sorry. Let me actually make it a bit sophisticated. The attorneys will be doing their thing, you know what I'm saying? So, the floor is still yours. Please continue.
Okay, last regime, our civil unions. So I think I mentioned earlier on in the video, if you are a male and a male or a female and a female of the same, basically you're the same sex. In the past, you actually couldn't conclude a marriage because the act by definition didn't allow for people of the same sex to get married. But as we have a transforming society and we are moving towards recognition of, different walks, different setups and circumstances of people's lives, this is what was enacted. So essentially, you can now, as a same-sex couple, you can register a marriage in community or out of community, whatever the case may be.
Wow.
But you go via the route of the Civil Union Act.
Hey guys, I'm even feeling hot. Because this marriage stuff, guys, you know what? I feel like when people fall in love, we mostly get blinded and we all say this love is a blind thing, and then we don't really go and seek advice. I'm not saying anyone is getting married to get divorced, but divorce happens, and sometimes it actually gets a bit, I would say, dirty, because people that say they love each other all of a sudden are the people that are fighting. And I don't know, I don't want to get much into it, like I said, I have an attorney next to me. He knows better than I do, and I don't even want to deviate or go say things that I'm not supposed to say on this particular episode. But what are some of the consequences of divorce?
Look, Ray, I think you've asked a very good question.
Yeah.
And divorce is not something that's pleasant. I don't think anyone wakes up and says, you know what, I'm so excited to get divorced.
Well, apparently there are divorce parties happening now.
Yeah, fair enough, but it's never a pleasant experience, you know. And unless it's a mutual thing and the parties are on excellent terms, I can tell you, most of the time it ends up in tears, it ends up in frustration, and it ends up in resentment. And you know, as an attorney, many attorneys who deal with divorces will tell you you've got to keep maintain your professional and calm mannerisms when dealing with clients. But sometimes, you know, you think about the circumstances of parties, and it's often heartbreaking, especially when there are minor children involved, when there are you know, exorbitant amount of assets, and you know, you see sides of people that you know you can never expect, and that's the reality. So you've got to be prepared for it, and that's why I say be reactive. Take the time before you get married and seek the necessary legal advice.
Damn.
But we can't shy away from it. Divorces happen all the time.
It will happen. What's happening?
And we need to deal with it.
Yeah.
Let's jump into it quickly. I think from an overview or bird's eye view, if you're married in community of property and you get divorced, we need to deal with that marital regime on the basis that each spouse is lawfully entitled to 50% of the other spouse's estate.
Was Bill Gates married under community of property?
So Bill Gates, unfortunately, you've heard, he's getting divorced. From the court papers, I believe that there was no prenup, although it hasn't been confirmed. And I say prenup in the American context.
Yeah.
But they've apparently concluded a settlement agreement, and there's going to be a division of their estate, which in South African value equates to over R1 trillion.
Yay! That woman is balling. No, man, but I feel like she worked hard for it, and I feel like she was there through the tough times. And I know that Bill Gates built everything. Probably they would say he was the main person building it, but I always feel like it goes to the woman. I know here and there the woman probably gave advice here and there, you know. So hey, it is what it is, man.
Yeah, look, she was instrumental in a lot of his developments. In fact, she worked for Microsoft as an employee before they met and got married.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh no, she deserves the money. She deserves the money. Give her the money. Oh wow, interesting. Okay.
So yeah, they've gone about it in quite an amicable fashion.
Oh, wow.
Their attorneys have managed to conclude some sort of settlement, out of court settlement agreement. So it'll probably be, their estate will be divided on that basis.
Oh wow.
So I'll give you an example, right? And these are the sort of disputes that we notice a lot in practice. Wife has a pension fund, husband has a pension fund. By law, you're entitled to 50% of either pension fund. So to give you a practical example, the wife has a R1 million pension fund, the husband has a 500,000 Rand pension fund, right? Because it's 50-50, there has to be a calculation done. Her value is 1 million, his is 500,000, together it's 1.5 million.
Split it.
Right? So it must be split, they must both walk away with 750,000. So what does that mean? The attorneys for the husband will request that the wife's attorneys consent to the division or the removal of at least 250,000 Rand from her pension fund, payable to the husband.
Damn.
So at the end of the divorce, there's a 750 balance in the equation.
So this whole thing is not just for men trying to, it's also like women can also get into like serious, I won't say debt, but they could also get a serious bad consequence coming out of this.
Yeah, it's like I said, 50-50 of assets and liabilities.
Sure.
So
Okay.
the marriage comes to an end and the creditors are coming after the joint estate, or let's say they had a community home, a family home. When they get divorced and let's say they have to sell the property. And if there's a shortfall, whatever the case may be, for whatever reason, on that property, then that debt or liability is equally split.
The next one. Wow, okay.
The second one, under the default regime of a civil marriage, like we said, is the Anti-Nuptial contract, the ANC. Now you get divorced on an ANC basis. It is relatively simple. You issue the summons out of court and you proceed on that basis. The parties generally don't claim from each other. Whatever I had, I keep. Whatever you had, you keep. We go to court, we go to trial, whatever the case may be, or the matter gets settled, and we appear before the magistrate or the judge, and then you get a decree of divorce and call it a day.
Wow. So that's simple, yeah?
That's very simple. That's what we generally advise.
Okay.
You know, you had your businesses, you had your companies, you had your properties, whatever. You keep that and you move on.
I honestly feel like that is the real test of love. If you love me for me, and don't love me for any other thing, you know.
Right.
But unfortunately, this world is not like that. Like, few people can do that. But anyway, let's move on.
And then the third one is the out of community of property with the accrual. Now, that one is extremely complex because, again, now we've got to determine what did you acquire during the marriage? What have we accrued during the marriage? And I can tell you 99% of the time, there's always a dispute. No, this accrued, this is the value of it, I want half of that.
Yeah.
Those divorces take months to finalize. They cost you thousands in legal fees, and they most likely end up going to trial. And trial is very expensive. And generally they don't get settled. And I'm talking about where there's obviously a number of assets in the estate.
Damn.
So consider the implications of a marriage out of community or property with an accrual very carefully. And in most cases, when you see an attorney, and I'll tell you this, when you see an attorney and you conclude an anti-nuptial contract without accrual, the attorney will generally make you sign an indemnity stating that they've explained to you every single step related to that specific regime, that you understand the consequences.
It's
and
like
you cannot hold that firm liable when you realize in any future sense that you've
messed
made a
up.
mistake.
This sounds like going bungee jumping, which I will never do. Whereby you start signing an indemnity form when you go in bungee jumping. That means anything that has to do with signing an indemnity form.
Why? Because there's high risk.
I don't want to do it, man. I'm serious.
That's why I'm a big fan of the out of community or property without the accrual. And if you really find that you want to get married in community or property, even better. But without out of community property with the accrual, it's a really complex system.
Wow. Guys, I know love is great. We all want to fall in love and love well, but sometimes we have to also be clever about it. I'm not saying anyone should marry under anything. The choice is yours. I mean, at the end of the day, it's your life. You decide what you're going to do with it. But these are the information that we've given you. And look, I'm really grateful for inviting him to come on Farm Boys Talk, because I've learned a lot from what he said. And damn, that's all I'm going to say. Damn. Okay, so please choose wisely. If you're in love, choose wisely. If you're not in love, choose wisely. My brother, I appreciate you for coming on Farm Boys Talk, man. Damn it.
Thank you, Red. Thanks
You
for
gave
having
me a lot. You gave me a lot of info, man. You know what time it is. It's your boy, Kim Melanin. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do subscribe. Like, comment, share. Tell your auntie, your uncle, your father, your grandfather, your sister, even your ex-boyfriend, girlfriend. Tell them, your ex-wife. I don't know which one is ex-wife, but you know what time it is. We out.